You ever see a documentary about a cult and just think, how? How do they get such a complete psychological grip on people? It's a question that stumps a lot of us, and today, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Because that's the part that's really baffling, isn't it? We're not talking about just anyone. We're talking about intelligent, educated, sometimes even really skeptical people, the kinds of people you'd think would never fall for something like this. So what's the secret? How is it done?
All right, so first things first, let's just bust a huge myth right out of the gate. The easier answer, the one we often hear, is that the followers are just, weak-minded or not very smart. But the reality? It is so much more chilling than that. These aren't weak people. They're victims of a kind of weaponized psychology.
And that completely reframes the whole conversation. This isn't a story about a follower's weakness. It's a story about a manipulator's playbook. A deliberate, methodical, step-by-step process. And that's what we're here to do. We're going to open up that playbook and look at every single page.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the general psychology of control. Then we'll get into the 5 steps, starting with manufactured authority, then the affection trap, building the bubble, the fear lock, and finally, we'll talk about the person at the center of it all, the narcissistic leader.
And you have to understand, none of this happens by accident. It is a completely orchestrated journey. It's a process designed to methodically take apart someone's reality, piece by piece, and build a whole new one in its place. And it all starts with one absolutely critical foundation.
All right, step 1, this is the bedrock for everything else that's going to happen. It's all about creating an illusion of total, unshakable, absolute authority. The term for this is manufactured authority, and it's exactly what it sounds like, a deliberate tactic. The whole goal is for the leader to project this image of absolute certainty, so much certainty that it actually short-circuits your critical thinking. It's designed to silence that little voice in your head that's saying, something feels off here.
So how do they build it? Well, it's a few key things. First, there's that absolute unwavering confidence. They never ever doubt themselves. Then they layer on special symbols, things like robes or specific rituals, to make them seem special. They'll claim to have some kind of secret, exclusive knowledge that you can't get anywhere else. And all of this creates this weird tension in your mind. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. You're thinking, this seems weird, but they're acting so certain. And that makes you start to think, wow, if they're that sure, maybe I'm the one who's wrong.
It really comes down to this powerful psychological idea. It's not truth that wins minds, it's certainty. And once that foundation of certainty is in place, the person is perfectly set up for the next step.
Okay, let's move on to step 2. And this is where things get really, really clever. Because you might think control starts with fear, right? But it doesn't. It starts with setting a powerful emotional hook.
And here's the twist. The hook is set with affection. It's a total curveball. Before there's any intimidation, before there's any fear, you're hit with this just tidal wave of positivity.
The technical term for this is love bombing. Imagine someone new. Maybe they're feeling a little lost or lonely in life. Suddenly, they're just showered with praise, with attention, with this incredible feeling of being totally accepted. And this isn't just a mind game, it's chemical. It literally floods your brain with dopamine and oxytocin, the feel-good chemicals, and you become emotionally hooked on that feeling and on the group providing it. And this gets back to that question of, how do smart people fall for this? Because you'd think, okay, this much attention would feel fake, right? But that feeling of finally belonging, of being seen and loved, it's so incredibly powerful that it can just steamroll the part of your brain that's trying to whisper, hey, wait a minute, this seems too good to be true.
So once that emotional hook is set good and deep, the whole operation moves into step 3, building the bubble. This is where they start to take control of what you see, what you hear, and ultimately what you believe is real.
And how do they do that? By systematically isolating you. Suddenly, your old friends and your family, they're framed as negative influences. The outside news? Oh, that's all lies. It's fake. They build this intense us versus them worldview until the only source of truth you trust is the group and its leader.
And that's the end game right there. When you remove any outside perspective, any other way of looking at the world, the leader gains total cognitive control. Your entire understanding of what's good, what's true, what's real, it completely shifts to whatever the group says it is.
Okay, but that initial high, that love-bombing phase, it can't go on forever. And this brings us to a really critical turning point. Step 4, the fear lock. This is where the whole dynamic flips from reward to punishment.
Remember how we said the hook was set with affection? Well, now the trap is sprung with fear. This is the moment the cage door slams shut and the real control is locked in.
The tool they use here is coercive control. It's a constant pattern of threats, intimidation, and degradation. Suddenly, you're told that if you leave, you'll face spiritual ruin. You'll be completely shunned by everyone you care about. The cost of walking away is deliberately made to feel catastrophic, impossibly high. But here's the real kicker. The trap is so much deeper than just threats. By this point, the group is your identity. It's your social life, your purpose, your entire moral compass. So leaving doesn't just feel like losing your friends. It feels like you're literally erasing your own existence.
So who is the person at the wheel, driving this entire destructive machine? Well, that brings us to our fifth and final piece of the puzzle, the narcissistic leader.
And the research on this is pretty clear. These leaders almost always show strong traits of narcissism and often psychopathy. They are absolute masters of manipulation. But here's the key. They have a profound, genuine lack of empathy. To them, followers aren't really people. They're objects. They're what's known as narcissistic supply, just sources of admiration to constantly feed a bottomless ego.
And to keep that admiration, that supply, coming, they often create this toxic loop. Step 1, the leader invents a crisis. Could be a financial threat, a spiritual enemy, whatever. Step 2, this makes all the followers feel scared and unstable. Step 3, who do they turn to for safety? The leader, of course. And Step 4, the leader's power and importance gets reinforced. It's a vicious cycle, and it's designed to keep everyone off balance and unable to think for themselves.
So when you put it all together, when we close this playbook, you realize these aren't just simple little tricks. This entire system, from top to bottom, works by exploiting our most basic, most fundamental human needs. That deep desire we all have for purpose, for community, for a place to belong. And that really leaves us with a pretty chilling final question, doesn't it? How can our best qualities, our deepest virtues, the desire for connection, that search for meaning, how can those very things be turned into our greatest vulnerabilities? It's a sobering thought, and it really shows you just how powerful this kind of psychological manipulation